wrong Maltese official has been prosecuting passport cases. Police to appeal Carla Aquilina's not guilty verdict in dangerous driving case, and Valletta has the highest rate of domestic violence recorded this year. All this and more on today's episode of Lovin Daily. Good afternoon, Malta and Gozo. I'm Julian Bondi. To join me today is Yannick Parch. I'm sure you're all looking forward to the weekend, but before that, we've got an action-packed show for you today. The first story is all about a wrong Maltese official and how they've been prosecuting passport cases. Jan?
Yeah, so it's actually quite an interesting story which emerged from court yesterday, and one that could have significant implications on a number of cases going forward. So the story centers around a case of a man, a Syrian man who traveled to Malta using a fake passport and who was caught and was sentenced to a 6-month prison sentence. So after his conviction, the man changed lawyers and appealed his sentence. His new lawyer, Artis Atsopardi, argued on behalf of his client that the proceedings against him should be declared null and void because the case had been prosecuted by the principal immigration officer, who has no legal power to prosecute. Atsopardi pointed out, in fact, that the principal immigration officer has the right to arrest individuals suspected of having committed passport-related offences, but they do not have the legal power to actually prosecute them. This reasoning was accepted by the judge who was presiding over the case, who essentially, observed that yes, the law in fact does not give this principal immigration officer the power to prosecute, and in fact threw out the case and let the man walk free. It's significant because there are a number of passport-related cases prosecuted each year. In fact, according to a PQ submitted last April, there were about 72 people in prison for passport-related offences. Now, it isn't clear how many of them are at the appeal stage or how many of them are actually liable to having the accused walk free because of this. But it seems that this isn't the last time we're going to be hearing about this case.
No, certainly not. No, as you said, actually, this thing about passport case is actually really common in Maltese courts. Like, I don't know, every time I'm there, there's always seemingly a new case. However, I really have to say, what amateurish behavior by Malta's judicial system. It's little surprise our judicial system is in the worrying, almost terrible state it currently is in at the moment. I don't even know who's to blame is. Is it the Attorney General? Is it the judge? Is it the ministers? All of these people who, were aware of these cases, were seeing it happen, and nobody was even aware that this was incorrect. Obviously, it's going to have super ramifications on all these people. I'm sure these 70 people who are in prison because of it are going to be looking to appeal their case. And really, it's high time, people actually start shouldering responsibility for the problems in our judicial system. On to our next story, another court case related story, but police are looking to appeal the judgment in the case against Nationalist Party MP Carla Aquilina linked to a hazardous driving accident, of which he was recently found not guilty. So the incident itself had taken place in June 2019 in Marsa, along that road, from Marsa, that main road from Marsa to Valletta, when Aquilina was alleged to have disobeyed orders given to him by traffic police. Now, Labour Party presenter Calzone Navarra actually aired footage related to the incident on his television program Piazza, and sort of showed Aquilina, blocking the pathway of a ministerial car, while police officers are on motorbikes are sort of urging him to stop. Now, Aquilina was charged with an offence earlier this year. However, on 29 September, he was completely cleared of the charges against him. However, now sources have told Lovin Malta that police are looking to appeal the case, obviously raising actually some serious questions maybe about the influence that's being taking place on this case. Now, Aquilina himself, after he was cleared, actually said, the incident was an attempt by Stanley Navarra and one to damage his reputation, and maybe while I'm not, maybe the biggest fan, you can understand, where he is coming from, right? At the end of the day, Aquilina is actually, quite a vociferous critic against the government and all of that stuff. And, when you start seeing police pursuing a case quite frivolously, actually does raise concerns whether there's some sort of external pressure to do so.
Yeah, what fascinates me is the fact that some cases in this country are appealed and some others are, and I still can't get myself to be able to predict which case is going to be appealed or not. In fact, in this case, the magistrate even pointed out that the case should never have been prosecuted. Yet it seems that the police believe that their case was strong enough and they'll be appealing. We'll see how it turns out at the appeal stage. Our next story is about former PN leader Adrian Delia, who will be contesting the next general election on the 7th district, as well as the 8th, after he was given the green light to do so by the Nationalist Party's executive committee yesterday. In a Facebook post, Delia expressed his satisfaction at the decision, pledging to continue working hard for his constituents. So the 7 districts includes localities of Zebbuch, Dingley, Mjarm, Tarfa and Rabat. And this is the one Delia actually currently represents in Parliament. For those of you who follow politics, you'll remember that. So when he was elected in 2017, Adrian Delia was not a member of Parliament and needed to be co-opted to the House. And he took the seat of former MP, albeit for a few weeks, Jean-Pierre de Bono, who was elected on the 7th district. Delia's intention to run on this district has been made clear from the start, though it appears that there was some resistance to it. In fact, during the party's Independence Day celebrations at the Floriana Granaries, One News asked Greg about the issue, and Greg had responded by saying that it was still the subject of internal discussions and that he would ultimately decide on the basis of what he felt was the best for the party. Elsewhere, it was announced that PN MP Claudette Buttigieg will also be running on the 13th district, in addition to her hometown district, the 12th district. The 13th district includes basically all of Gozo and has become a key battleground between Labour and PN in recent years. What do you make of these?
Yeah, no, I think it's, particularly on the Gozo one, the PN has actually a real massive hole in Gozo, right? It's lost 3 MPs from that district. The late Frederick Azzopardi, who was really popular in Gozo, Marta Sportelli, who sort of has gone into sort of private work, and David Stellini as well, So there's a real massive hole to plug in Gozo, which, as you said, is a really hotly contested battleground that tends to switch both ways. So obviously we'll see how that develops. On Delia, without getting into many other things, I actually really envisioned this like quite a problematic, move. Now I understand probably Adrian Delia wants to run and everything, and obviously there's pressure for him to do so. However, his links to Jürgen Fenech remain what they are, whether we like it or not. He's subject to a magisterial inquiry because of it, that he might have taken bribes over it, and, it might eventually end up, biting Bernard Grech and the PN later on. As well, what really does worry me is obviously there's a really tense relationship between Adrian Delia and his other PN colleagues, which, truth be told, is only going to be heightened during an election season, when really you've got, effectively all of these candidates from the same party competing for 2, maybe 3 seats in a district, So it's particularly in District 7 where it's really, really actually tight to call. We'll see how it's going to happen. Obviously, from a journalist perspective, we're looking forward to it. A bit of conflict always makes some good headlines. On to our next story, all about Malta's capital, Valletta, and actually some very worrying news about our capital city. It's been revealed that it could be the epicenter of domestic violence on the island. Well, that's at least according to data presented to Parliament by Home Affairs Minister Byron Camilleri. Now, Camilleri revealed the figures following a parliamentary question from Beppe Fenekadami, who simply requested, a breakdown of domestic violence cases in Malta and which localities they occurred. So just as on an overall general note, since between January January and August, there have been 1,151 domestic violence cases reported to police. And according to the data, the overall, biggest figure is St. Paul's Bay, which saw 90 reported cases in the first 8 months of the year. Now, St. Paul's Bay is probably one of, if not the largest locality in Malta. So when you start taking population into account with the locality, it actually turns out that Valletta has the highest incident per 10,000 inhabitants. The figures show that there are around 65 cases reported for every 10,000 inhabitants, followed closely by Bormla, which is 60 cases reported for every 10,000 inhabitants. Now, both areas have well documented to have struggled with an issue like domestic violence. So hopefully, these kind of figures, obviously nothing against the people who live there and everything, is going to sort of increase, police presence and increase work being done in these areas. Now, for those of you who maybe see sometimes as these figures as kind of worrying, because really it shows, sometimes the number of reports being made are actually on the increase a little bit. However, there are a myriad of reasons behind this. One of this, which actually could be quite positive, is that people are more and more reporting incidents of domestic violence. Before in Malta, a lot of victims suffered in silence. Nobody would talk about it. Police, in very many cases, would actually do nothing. And now, at least, we've made that jump, where victims' voices are currently being heard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the awareness is increasing and people are becoming more aware, though we still hear about stories of people either reporting domestic violence and being told, go back home and forgive him. We also get a lot of cases where someone might report a case of domestic violence and then doesn't go through with either testifying or forgives their aggressor. There's obviously various reasons that this happens. But I mean, it does remain a very serious problem. And in fact, we've had incidents where a person might refuse to testify against the aggressor, and then they end up getting murdered. In fact, there was one case, I think at the start of last year, in which a young woman had reported domestic violence before in the past, and then ended up getting killed because nothing was done. So hopefully the situation will continue to improve as we kind of become more aware that these things exist all around us. Our final story is about the contractor who allegedly dumped an Indian migrant worker on the roadside. And instead of taking him to hospital last night, Glenn Farrugia of J&G Farrugia Contractors was granted bail. So those of you, obviously it's very difficult to have forgotten, last week we had the case of Lovin Daily, who fell 2 stories at a construction site. After he fell, he was in very clear need of medical attention. His employer walked up to him, to promise him to take him to hospital, but instead dumped him on the side of the road. So he was charged in court last week with voluntarily causing grievous injuries, as well as a raft of employment-related offences, and was remanded in custody. He was back in court yesterday for the first sitting in the compilation of evidence. During the sitting, Jaitek testified from his hospital bed and revealed even more details about kind of what went down that day. He told the court how he was taken into Farrugia's car, and how Farrugia dragged him from his armpits and just left him at the middle of the road and told him to tell the police that he was hit by a car. He described to the court how he had to drag himself from the middle of the road using his elbows, where he just sat and lay there until passers-by actually came across him and took him to hospital. So the sitting yesterday lasted well into the night. I mean, it was, I think, past 9-10 p.m. when it finished. And the magistrate heard all the witnesses in the case, so that Farrugia could be granted bail. In fact, lawyers Franco De Bono and Matthew Schwirp, who are assisting Farrugia, both praised the magistrate for the efficiency with which the witnesses were heard, and for the speed with which the case is being presided.
Yeah, no, I mean, a good look into the first story as well. It's actually quite good, seeing a magistrate take a compilation of evidence seriously. For those of you who don't know, a compilation of evidence should only take 30 days. We're actually in Malta, it takes years, so actually really good seeing the case progress quite quickly. For those of you out there who are maybe angry about seeing Farrugia being granted bail, listen, we're with you. It's a very horrific and shocking case. However, we need to understand, that you're innocent until proven guilty, and really and truly know all the witnesses, whether so he has his right, you know, to sort of be released, obviously subject to some serious conditions. You can read about this all on lovinmolta.com, but Lamin actually gave, you know, some actually really shocking details about what happened, you know, in the lead up to his incident. Most importantly, he said that, you know, he was actually never given any safety equipment, despite working on a construction site, which we know is the most dangerous in the country, and actually was only earning about 50 euros per day for 10.5 hours of work with barely any lunch break, and doing that 6 days a week. So also shining a light, you know, on the issues migrants, the conditions migrants are facing in the country. You can read all about it on lovinmolta.com. That's it from us for today, and remember, always have a weekend full of loving.